woman was sexually abused when she was just 14. As a boy, this man was molested for 4.5 years. And this woman was sexually abused between the ages of 14 and 16. Their molesters were all sports coaches who abused their position, their power, and their trust. Tonight, On the Line investigates sex abuse in sport and asks, how safe are our children? Sport symbolizes courage, fairness, and morality. That anyone should use sport for sexual abuse cuts across this image. But On the Line has evidence that it's widespread. In all sports, from Olympic level to grassroots. Few are brave enough to admit this problem exists. Sex abuse in sport is the final taboo.
Sexual abuse seems to me to be the kind of the last frontier, if you like. There is still tremendous secrecy, taboo, terrific fear about discussing the subject, possibly because it's much more widespread than we all dare to believe.
The first thing to remember is that there are some men, regretfully, who go into sport to get access to children sexually. Let's stop pretending it doesn't exist, because it does.
Mariah Burton Nelson was born in Philadelphia in 1956. Naturally gifted at all sports, swimming was her first love. Competing for her local team when she was 6, by her teens, she was spending all her time at the pool.
It was there that I met the coach who ultimately molested me. He was 25 when I was 14.
Mariah's coach was married with 2 small children. He had a lot to lose. Like most coaches who abuse children in their care, he was careful, spending months building up her trust, to then abuse it.
There were locker room scenes where he would turn out the lights and say, oh, let's all just get undressed, and then, we'll turn the lights back on after we're dressed. Late at night, on a moonless night, we would skinny dip. He began playing games that involved taking off our clothes. Then he would drive us home at night, my 2 good friends and me, and he would drop off each of them at their homes first, and then I was the last one. And then we would be in the middle of some good conversation, and we would go park somewhere and just talk. So he was gaining my trust and feeling me out in an emotional way, leading to feeling me in a physical way. I see now he was very scared. He was scared he would end up in jail for statutory rape, and he was going very slowly in order to gain my trust and make sure I was not going to turn him in. He took advantage of me, clearly. I believed that it was okay because he said it was okay. I mean, when he told me to swim an extra 1,000 yards, I swam an extra 1,000 yards. That's part of it. You're in a one-down position to your coach. You do what they tell you to do. You don't say no when you're a child. You don't say no to an adult if they have a lot of authority and you're somewhat intimidated by them.
In Ontario, in Canada, a rowing coach inspired a group of teenage girls to take up his sport. Fiercely ambitious for success, he demanded and received their unquestioning devotion. Assured of their loyalty and trust, it was then easy to betray.
He picked me out as someone to always be around him. And then he would drive me home last, and I remember, put his hand on my knee or put his arm around me. And then at some point, I don't know how or why, he said, he would call me up and have conversations with me on the phone. And I said, well, I'm going babysitting. And so I would be alone. The baby would be sleeping. So he came over, and we became physically intimate.
Hi, great to see you.
In fact, Suzanne was not alone. To the coach, the crew were his harem, and he secretly abused several of the girls. One was Christine Sobolski. She was just 14 when the coach, already molesting Suzanne, started having sex with her.
There was one situation where I did not want to have sex with him, and I finally, I stood up to him at that point, and he was very, very angry with me, and he drove me home, and we didn't say a word to each other all the way home, and I slammed the door, and then he rolled down his window and said, "Don't you ever do that again," just in a really harsh tone of voice. And all night I couldn't sleep because I was so afraid that, oh my gosh, I could lose my position. He may not ever let me row again. Like he had that kind of power as a coach. He had that power to pull you out of the boat. And so the next morning I cycled out to where he was living and apologized, and then smoothed things over so everything was okay.
To a talented and ambitious 14-year-old, apologizing seemed the only option.
I know it seems really dumb, like I wanted him to apologize to me, but because I felt threatened, my position as a rower, athlete to a coach, I had to, because I wanted to continue on in that sport.
Always suspicious of the coach's relationship with her friend, it was only last year that Suzanne plucked up courage to seek the truth.
I finally spoke to Christine and came right out and asked her, were you involved with our coach? And she said yes. And I felt even worse because as we talked, I discovered that he had told her all the same things he had told me. And he said, he told me that he loved me on and on. He told her that he loved her. He said he wanted to marry me. He said he wanted to marry her. We would maybe have children someday. I would be a wonderful mother. I mean, he just said it all. And he made me feel that I was really special. And suddenly that was, everything that he said was a lie.
Hi. What's that positive remark watching you?
Janet Smith has been a qualified fitness instructor for 6 years. Until injury forced her to stop, she was a keen volleyball player with a National League team. From the outset, her coach used his position to harass women in the squad.
It was generally fairly accepted that was what he was like, that he was one to sexually harass, that he was one to ask sexual favours. You just accepted it, that was how he was, and there wasn't a lot you could do about it.
But comments and innuendo can sometimes develop into something much more frightening. A few weeks after joining the club, Janet found herself in a threatening situation.
He invited me back to his house to fill in some forms. I remember seeing him lock the front door behind him as we went in. I didn't think anything of it. He said to me, "Oh, there's a bit of fluff on your bum." So I turned around to brush it off. But then he grabbed both my hands and said, "No, let me do that for you." And he held both my hands in his one hand, and I tried to get my hands free, but I couldn't. And I thought, oh, hold on a minute here, because I remembered that he'd locked the front door as we came in. So I froze and I just stood there and had to allow him to wipe this fluff off of my bum. But when he wiped it off, it was really slow stroking movements. It wasn't, a quick stroke, it was really slow stroking movements. And I just froze and I just said to him, "Let go, let go, let go." Eventually he let go. After that, I went to open the front door, but he'd taken the key out. He then said, "No, stand back and let me do it for you." It wasn't opening the door for me to leave. It was about him and the fact that he was in control and that he had the power.
But sports coaches who use their position of power to abuse do not just prey on women. On the line has evidence suggesting there's also widespread sexual abuse of boys. 10 years ago, Gary was one of the best junior judo players in the country. His coach was a respected, trusted man in the local community and at the club.
It was his life. That's all he did. In fact, to be honest, I find it hard how he ever kept a job down, because that's all I ever saw him do. It was just judo. Either it was doing something for the judo. If it wasn't judo itself, it was taking the kids away, or it was fixing the van, or it was doing the lights in the judo club, or fixing the showers, or that's all he ever did.
With such commitment and dedication to the sport, no one suspected Gary's coach was using his position to sexually harass the boys.
It was daft things like, obviously judo, we have to get into weight categories. He used to make us shower and strip off completely to get weighed. It wasn't necessary. And we always did it in the seclusion of the dressing room, and we always went in on his own. He used to just call us in and out, and we all knew that it was eyeing us up or looking at us or whatever, but we all knew something was happening.
6 months after joining the club, Gary was sexually assaulted for the first time. He was 10. The assaults continued for 4.5 years.
He did abuse me sometimes on actual judo mat. He would say it was part of a judo technique or a part of a judo move because it's basically like wrestling. I know it isn't. You know, he's touching me in places that I know he doesn't need to, he shouldn't be. But a lot of it was when we went away for weekends or we went away for a week, it was putting the sleeping bags together. You know, and you need to take all your clothes off because you need to be warm, and I'll keep you warm. And then they just used to lay rigid all night, awake, and he just used to fiddle, I suppose, for want of a better phrase. From the offset, I knew it was completely wrong. I knew it wasn't my fault, and I knew what he was doing was wrong, illegal, whatever. I knew that when, say, we were going away in 2 weeks' time, I knew something was going to happen to me in 2 weeks, and I expected it. I went to bed expecting it, and I got up, shrugged it off, and started the day.
And did it never cross your mind to actually tell the truth?
No, never. No. No, it's simple as that. I didn't know, never considered it. I didn't see the point. I didn't think people would believe me. I know a lot of the other kids didn't want to say anything for the same reasons, because they said no one will believe us anyway. What's the point?
Eventually, someone at the club did tell. 7 years after his first offence, the coach was found guilty on 5 counts of indecent assault on Gary's teammates. He was sentenced to 18 months imprisonment.
I'm sure there's thousands of other people doing exactly the same thing that we probably never even know about. You know, he's touching me in places that I know he doesn't need to, he shouldn't be.
Sadly, Gary's story doesn't surprise Celia Brackenridge. Working at Sheffield Hallam University, she spent the last year documenting cases of sexual harassment and child sex abuse in sport.
Sport is no different from any other area of life. We have our fair share of perverts, we have our fair share of heroes and heroines. Sport should not be isolated and treated as if it was something on a pedestal, and therefore not to be investigated. We can't document the extent of this problem, we don't have scientific research evidence to put before them, but we know there is a problem, we know it's a significant problem, and the more we look, the more we find. I would be crazy if I tried to suggest any statistic. All I would say is that the most frequently quoted statistic is that 1 in 9 boys and 1 in 4 girls has been sexually abused before mid-teenage years, and that, I think, that is a gross underestimate in the general population. Talking to people in my own researches, I feel that we have a huge problem on our hands in sport.
Drawing from her experience as an international sportswoman and coach, together with her work with athletes who've been abused, Celia Brackenridge claims it's possible to identify the type of sports where sexual abuse may be likely to occur.
If you look at typical characteristics like very young age, perhaps very scantily clad, disposition to rely on the authority of the coach, maybe many trips away from home base, then you have to look at sports like swimming, gymnastics, trampolining perhaps. To the young athlete, the coach is a kind of god, and that godlike status can so easily spill over into abusive relationships, whether it be low-level harassment on a day-to-day basis, or perhaps at the more extreme end, actual sexual abuse.
On the Line talked to one man who used his position as a swimming coach to abuse boys for 16 years. By the time he was caught and prosecuted for indecent assault, he'd become a national coach in Britain. He admits he went into sport and coaching to get close to children he then abused. Having served his sentence, On the Line agreed to protect his identity.
Well, as far as coaching was concerned, it was the attraction of the children. But it was also wanting to see them get better in their own sport. But there was a double side to it. There was also sexual attraction to the children as well.
In what way is coaching a good way of getting access to children?
Coaching can, I think, maybe it's the wrong word, but legitimize access. You can do it because you're doing it with permission of the parents. They don't know why you're doing it, other than the fact that you're coaching their kids, and they don't realize that there can be underlining reasons for it. As far as they're concerned, he's been accepted by the club, he's been accepted by other parents, and therefore, as far as they're concerned, that's okay. So it's too easy.
Some children are advised to use sport as a way of building confidence and self-esteem, but this can play into the abuser's hands. John targeted quieter and more vulnerable youngsters because they were less likely to speak out.
I was picking out quite a few of the what I call latchkey children, which are children who are sort of home before their parents get home in the night because their parents are both working. It was a way of getting into the child in so much that you were being looked upon as a second father figure, and by doing so, you know, they thought the world of you, and they'd do anything for you.
Once the boys were ensnared, John used his position as a coach to advance their sports careers.
The boys I was abusing, it was possible for me to make them into the positions of captain and vice-captain, and so they'd have an edge over any of the other youngsters that were in the team at the time.
And how aware were the children that by doing as you wished sexually, they might get a place on the team?
I think they were pretty aware of that, yeah. Yeah, although then it was never said, but I'm pretty sure they were aware.
Hi, Mandy.
Yeah.
It's Ray here.
All right.
Ray Wire runs the Gracewell Clinic in Birmingham, a pioneering centre for assessing and treating sex offenders. Wire claims sport is an ideal breeding ground for sexual abuse.
In our experience of working with men who sexually abuse, we have come across many men who view sport as a cover or a way in to get access to children, and that's ranged from anything from setting up football teams in a voluntary capacity right through to professional coaching. A coach has power and authority over the children they're training. They have respect from parents, respect from the community, and because often their lives are dedicated to children, it is hard to believe that a person in that position can abuse.
In Ray Wire's experience, John's case is typical of paedophile behaviour.
He has clearly used his position as a coach to get access to those children and to give them attention, which he's then made abusive. And anyone looking at him would never believe he could do it. He was a nice man, but monsters don't get close to children. Nice men do. And until we recognise that, abuse will carry on in these areas. He had total power and control. His life, it would appear, was dedicated to children.
A lot of people will know a lot of abusers, and they probably never even know. And they'll never know all their life, because it doesn't come out. People either don't say anything, or are too scared to say anything, or say something and are told to shut up.
Let's really hit that last one. I'll get a time for you. Take your
So
mark.
what can be done to combat this problem?
10 seconds
First and
later.
foremost, there needs to be a climate in which youngsters who are abused can come forward. At the moment, the odds are stacked against them. Mariah was sexually abused by her swimming coach 20 years ago. Now working as a journalist, she's highlighting her experiences and tracing other women who've been abused to publicise the problem.
Well, that's why I'm writing about it, because we need to come forward. I'm glad. It sounds like you're very courageous. I get a lot of calls from young women, and they're in trouble. They're scared. They don't know what to do. They're afraid, as I was, to report the man because they don't want him to go to jail. They're afraid to talk to their parents because they're afraid to get in trouble. All right, good. it's clear to me that it is still widespread, in part because there's no supervision of these men, and they have a lot of access to these young virginal women, and they take advantage of it.
The American Swimming Coaches Association, ASCA, forbids coaches from having sex with their athletes, but they don't allow either swimmers or parents to report a coach for suspected sexual abuse. Instead, they have to enlist the help of a second coach. He must assess the situation and decide whether there are grounds for investigation. ASCA freely admit their primary concern is to protect the coach.
We're not allowing parents to come forward or athletes to come forward. If we do that and allow that, we have absolutely no way to protect the coach from spurious accusations. And I will absolutely guarantee you that if we were to allow that, we would have many more spurious accusations than would have factual cases.
Meanwhile, the English Amateur Swimming Association is one of the few sports authorities in Britain which plans to introduce a code of conduct for its coaches, details of which were not made available to On the Line. But even they admit this will not stop a coach who's determined to abuse.
I think if each governing body had their own particular code of ethics and code of conduct, that would probably help. But at the end of the day, for the person that offends for the first time, it's very, very difficult because you just don't know who that person's going to be.
Great.
Every year, clubs are swamped with youngsters keen to take up sport. There are currently 20,000 children registered with the British Judo Association. As with most other sports, judo relies on hundreds of volunteers to coach and train.
I think the main problem is the British sport in general. It tends to be all on a voluntary basis. So anyone can get in to sport. Anyone that is willing to put the time in and the enthusiasm and the effort can get into a fairly influential position in sport, you know, looking after 30, 40, 50, 60 children.
Seth Birch is technical director of the BJA. It was his organisation to which Gary's coach belonged before his prosecution. He's convinced his sport is clean, but says, as in all sports, parents should be cautious.
It all comes down to making the parent aware of what the potential is.
But you've admitted you don't highlight specifically sexual harassment and sexual abuse as being a potential problem to parents.
It's always a potential problem. We're talking about one incident at the moment over the 5-year period.
How do you know that there's only one incident?
Well, we've been informed of only one. There's been one conviction.
How do you know that there aren't others?
Well, we don't.
How aware do you make parents and athletes when they come into swimming that there is the potential for abuse?
I think if we're honest at this point in time, that probably doesn't happen. But I think all I can say is that certainly the Amateur Swimming Association are taking measures at this point in time to ensure that there is a greater awareness of the problems that potentially face parents. And I say potential, and I think you do have to say that, because it would be very wrong of us to go around and accuse people of various acts which they didn't actually partake in.
2 times 55? Yeah, 150. 150, thank you, Jack.
And good coaches, too, should be more aware, ensuring their actions are never open to suspicion.
Ready?
I have one case that I've researched where a coach is taking athletes away from a training track on non-club nights. The parents think this is wonderful because their child is getting extra coaching. Now, it may be the case that the child is getting extra coaching, but I think it's an unwise professional practice to do that.
The National Coaching Foundation is concerned that currently a coach found guilty of abuse in one sport could quite easily gain employment in another. They want a national register to automatically cross-check the record of every coach in this country.
Well, I think we could move towards a standard system of accreditation and almost a licensing system which would at least produce a national register of accredited coaches. And so you'd have some sanctions if an offence was detected. It wouldn't stop the first offender, of course, but at least it would ensure that people who had transgressed were never exposed, or children were never exposed to them again in a coaching situation.
The whole idea is that we would like to monitor every single coach and every single club within the association. It's a matter of how we can do it within the economic confines of today's environment. We have records of all the coaches or the registered coaches on file. The only thing that isn't done is at current there's no check with the police or legal records.
These measures would need legislation. The government says it supports a move to a national register. On the Line asked for an official to discuss the subject on the programme, but the invitation was declined.
When I say pull, and you've got to try and pull each other across the mat. Okay?
We have an agency for education and training of coaches in this country, and it is doing an enormous amount to raise professional standards, but the area of sexual harassment and sexual abuse remains still to be charted, and I would certainly like to see all the agencies in this country in sport linked together so that we have a comprehensive register of qualified coaches, a possibility for vetting and monitoring and tracking coaches through their careers, not only to protect the innocent children and athletes, but also to protect sound coaches and professional coaches from unwarranted accusations by athletes.
Even if a system to monitor coaches is set up, everyone agrees this still won't catch the coach who has no record of abuse. In Philadelphia, Mariah's swimming coach molested her for 2 years and has never been prosecuted. In Canada, the man who abused Christine and Suzanne went on to coach the Canadian Olympic team. Gary was molested by his judo coach for 4.5 years. This coach abused other boys for 7 years before he was finally imprisoned. And John, the national coach prosecuted for indecent assault, admits he abused children in his care for 16 years. And what's more, at no time did the swimming association to which he belonged suspect him.
I was caught through pornography, and had I not been, then I'd still be coaching today. And right from the time I started coaching, right through to the highest level I got to, at no time was I caught, and I'd still, in actual fact, be active now.
I felt let down when I was a child because I didn't get looked after. I didn't think I did. My mum and dad loved me, and they still do, and they do anything for me. But another adult became involved to something that they didn't know was what was happening, and ruined my childhood and changed me.